The sixth of Joseph Haydn's Opus 76 string quartets is in many ways the most forward-looking of all. Almost all of the conventions of quartet writing for which Haydn is appropriately credited are called into question in this masterful E-flat major essay. Its novelty is apparent from the very beginning of the opening movement, the theme's halting progress sounding for all the world like a freshman composition exercise, little more than a musical skeleton. This turns out to be the tema for a strophic set of variations culminating in and ending with an expansive fugue. The second movement is even more amazing, hewing to absolutely no known symphonic form, but bearing a vague resemblance to a strophic hymn, but with plenty of connective tissue. One of the most astonishing things about the movement is Haydn's choice of B major as the key, the inharmonically respelled flat submediant of the whole. Remarkably enough, Haydn does not indicate the key with a key signature, instead writing the alterations into the score as accidentals. The composer did that almost certainly because of the fact that the movement's main theme is due to be presented in a dazzling variety of near and distantly related keys before finally settling into B major for good for a much more substantial fugue than the one we heard in Movement 1. The coda is almost unbelievably haunting, and its final bars contain some of the most radical chromaticism anyone could have hoped to hear during the 18th century. This beautiful movement is, to my mind, one of the finest things Haydn ever wrote. The minuet movement is also unusual, first for its tempo, which places it squarely in the domain of the scherzo, but this is not unique in Haydn's output, as we've seen once before in this very set. More surprising is the character of the trio, which Haydn identifies as alternativo. The term is a borrowing from the French Baroque, indicating a second minuet to be played as an alternative to the first, with the latter then brought back to frame the former. That is, of course, the pattern of a minuet and trio movement, and in that sense, the trio is always an alternative, so Haydn clearly meant something else. His intent is reflected in the music, in which the E-flat major scale is simply plied downward 4 times, beginning with the cello and rising through the ranks, and then upward following the same orchestration. The first statement in each case is naked. The other 3, then, are clothed in an increasingly elaborate web of counterpoint. This happens a second time, this time beginning with the first violin and continuing downward through the ranks. A third statement of the cycle, which follows the original design, closes the trio. This is quite an alternative to the usual pattern of 2 repeated strains. Finally, the finale is anything but the mercurial, fleet-footed thing that we expect from this composer, but instead a bristling contrapuntal tour de force in the course of which Haydn spins an elaborate sonata-form web from the first violin's first 5 notes. Although the composer called for the repeat of both large sections of the movement, the Kodály Quartet, represented here in a release by Naxos, has elected to ignore the second repeat. I think you'll probably agree with me that that's a pity, if for no other reason than the fact that it would be a great pleasure to hear once again that impertinent, discombobulating rhythmic trick that Haydn plays during the development. It's out of character for me to present a postscript like this to music that I've just offered, and doubly so to attempt it unscripted. I deplore the awkward silences that often punctuate my extemporaneous speaking. In this case, however, it seems to me that both are probably appropriate. Now, I've come to the end of the Opus 76 set of Haydn quartets, and I have to decide what to do next. I think I may have the problem solved for at least the next couple of weeks, as I plan to take up the 2 quartets of Opus 77, but beyond that, I started this channel several years ago with a symphony series. That at least was one of a couple of aims that I had. The other one was to offer my own small store of atheist snark in the context of what was at that time a flourishing YouTube community of comment and conversation among atheists. And so I read a few essays and poems and about a third of the Bible on my channel before I figured I pretty much said whatever I needed to say on that, in that direction. My other motive was to offer something that might help music lovers who think they might enjoy classical music more if they understood it better, I thought I might be able to help them somewhat along those lines, and so I started a symphony series, beginning with the last 13 of Haydn's symphonies, offering running written commentary to the recordings that I'd selected. And I tried in those commentaries to address a range of viewers, from those who are fairly adept at Western music theory, maybe on account of some courses they've taken, to those who would benefit not at all from that, but who might find something else in my approach that they could resonate with. What I mostly focused on at that time, and continue to focus on to this day, is the movement structure, its overall design. I know if I'm headed from point A to point B and I am somewhere in between those 2 points, uncertain of where I am, that does cause me a certain amount of anxiety, and I think that's not unusual among us humans. And I think the same is kind of true if I'm listening to a piece of music and don't know what to expect and have no idea where I am in it. So I think that structure is always a good thing to go after. I think it can be pretty easily understood by almost anyone, and I think it probably contributes the same kind of comfort that having a roadmap at hand can give one on a long journey. When I started that series, my far off, very, very distant and shining goal was the symphonies of Gustav Mahler, which I imagined I might be able to address someday. Well, I figured I'd work my way to them through the other major symphonists, at least a few of them, mostly in the Austro-Germanic symphonic tradition, from Haydn to that great far-off culminating point. I knew that it would take me years, and as it turns out, it's taken longer than I expected, because what I did not foresee is that I would spend so much time with chamber music. I made significant detours also into the symphonic poem, and less significant detours into the concerto, the art song, and world music. About 6 months ago, after working on and off with that symphony series for years, I had finally gotten to the point where I could take up Mahler, and I did so with a vengeance. I posted videos over the first 5 of those symphonies, and I was happily at work on the 6th, the tragic symphony of Mahler, and was in fact in about the middle of the final movement, the one with the death-dealing hammer blows, when a very large hammer fell on the head of the old atheist Codger. My little buddy Endocene succumbed to a virus that neither of us could have seen coming. I thought he would outlive me. He made me so happy. I buried him 7 weeks and 2 days ago today. I might have had, at most, 2 or 3 tear-free days since that time, and I feel absolutely hollowed out with grief. And I can't imagine at this point that I'll ever recover from the loss. A day after I buried Endocene, I posted my work on the 3rd of the Mahler 6th movements as a memorial to the dearest day-to-day friend I'd ever had, only a little over 3.5 years old when he died. Then I repaired a couple of Mendelssohn videos that I'd posted maybe 3 years earlier. They had some playback problems, and so I fixed those. But I felt the need to continue with this kind of creative endeavor, if you can even call it that, because at least when I'm working on this music, I do experience some happiness. And I do love these Opus 76 quartets very deeply, and it's been a great pleasure to get to know them better. So I don't exactly know what the future holds for this channel. I think you can expect to see the 2 quartets of the Opus 77 set over the next couple of weeks, and beyond that, I don't know. I don't know that I'll ever be able to return to the Mahler. Maybe someday I'll be able to finish it and post it as another memorial. I just don't know. See you later.